Yeah, welcome to part two. We're going to pick right back up where we left off on this commentary on but why Christianity and see what we can learn from the rest of this talk. I'm still, I didn't listen ahead, so I'm right where we left off. I got back from vacation, and looks like we're getting a good receipt on this video, so we'll just continue right on.
There are sometimes you can read. There are mysterious ways in which, for example, like the saints will talk about when you take communion, you are already in the eschaton. You're right. But it's something which, when you're in the eschaton, you're also not in regular time. You're not in the normal time. You're not in the way that the world is laid out. And coming back from that, in some ways, will always relativize and make things imperfect and and somewhat off from the. And so I think that in terms of the idea of the idea that Christianity offers a map for reality, I think we always have to remember that eschatology is a central part of how we understand that how the logos manifests himself in the world, because the logos is the fullness of the logos has not yet been seen. The fullness of the logos is coming. It's over the hill. It's come, Lord Jesus, right? This sense that we're calling it into being, but it never it doesn't arrive in the way that we expect it, right? Even in the book of, even Christ says, if you say, here he is, don't listen to those who say there he is. Like, that's not how it's going to happen. So in terms of mapping, that's one of the things I want to offer. And the other part, though, I want to offer in terms of relationality, in terms of the Trinity, is we always have to remember that the Trinity is not just relationality; it is one.
Yes, of course.
Right. You always have to keep that aporia present for it to be the. So it's both the one in some ways of the Neoplatonist, but it also is the fullness of relationality in the multiple, right? So it's those two things at the same time. It avoids the problem of Gnosticism and the problem of the degenerate manifestations, you could say, right? That manifestations or things that proceed from the one are immediately degenerate for that reason. Anyway, so those are a few things I wanted to offer, but it's mostly Jordan. You have to. I think you're the. A lot of it was about the things that you said. So go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I actually didn't expect Jonathan to continue so long last time, although I'm glad I stopped it where I did because I was dog tired. If your map is not yet completed, but you know what the telos is, then even with a good telos, the map's not going to be complete. So the incomplete mapping, I like that. That's not how I would have laid it out, but I like that. It's not enchanted enough for me. But I like what he said there. Yeah, I mean, sure. That's definitely, not going to find any disagreement. That's for sure. And I think this point about the Trinity, I mean, John seems to, the Trinity is three and the one. Okay, well, your Neoplatonism is solved. I don't know why you are holding on to it. Just saying, dude, like, what are you doing? Because I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. There's your many and the one right there. You don't need this Neoplatonic rebellion against all sanity, logic, reason, and rationality. I mean, yeah. So it's very odd that agreement is had, but no movement is made. And that's one of those things you have to look out for in this world. And you'll see this a lot. It's one way to think about it is false ecumenism, right? We've been focusing on the idea of ecumenism for so long, and we value it so highly for no good reason. I mean, I know what the reason is, but that's a different video. If you want to see that video, you'll have to comment and ask me. But there's no good reason behind the relentless ecumenism, right? Because at some point you run out of things to agree on, right? And that's really what this is about. One way to think about the end of modernity, or whatever you want to frame it, or I guess I'd put it the crumbling of the age of gnosis, maybe, is to say, all right, here's the, where the tools we were using before aren't working. Right? And so ecumenism has reached its end because it was a tool of modernity. And so it's not working anymore. Right? We're back to the fighting that preceded modernity to some extent. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about modernity, I use the age of gnosis for this, which I think is a better frame. Ecumenism comes along with it. The reason why we make so much progress after the Protestant Revolution isn't merely because printing press. That doesn't explain it. You could say the proliferation of YouTube is the dark side of democratization of communication of personal thought, of which I'm apparently guilty, but whatever. Now we just have too much, right? We have a flood of information, right? Where'd the information come from? We valued it too highly in the age of gnosis, and now we've got gnosis everywhere. We've got knowledge as propositions, John's so-called propositional tyranny, everywhere. It's everywhere. It's just the world is dripping in it. And that's part of the problem. Ecumenism is the same way. We've run out of things to agree on. We're at full agreement in some sense, right? There's no longer a way for us to continue to agree because we've already agreed on all the things we agree on. We're not moving. John says, yes, I understand that the Trinity is also the unity or the one. Okay, dude, then what should proceed from that understanding? This is where we have agreement. Yay, right? And everybody assumes, oh, we agree, therefore you see the world the way I see the world, therefore you come to the same conclusions that I come to. That's two errors. I can agree with you that a certain person is bad and disagree on what they're bad about. My famous example of this is George W. Bush. I agreed with the Democrats that George W. Bush was a bad person. Just all the things they thought he was bad for, I thought, no, those are good things. And a bunch of the things that they thought he was good about, I was like, no, he's cooperating with you idiots and you're bad people. And whatever, I guess I was ahead of my time because all of that panned out exactly the way I thought it would, which I probably should cry about every day, but whatever, we're here. Yeah, you want the uniparty? That's where it started. I don't think it's particularly helpful framing, but also not entirely wrong. And this idea of radical agreement is not solving a problem. It only seems to solve a problem in the age of gnosis, where I'll agree on the facts and the knowledges, but it doesn't tell you what to do about them. It's the Aesop problem all over again. We can agree that the door is green, but we might not agree on whether or not we should paint it. The fact of the door being green doesn't tell you whether or not it should be painted. And our agreement on the fact that it's green doesn't tell you that either. And John's agreement with all these things doesn't make him any more Christian, if that's even a valid way to think about it. Let's continue.
Well, when you said about the logos, so what I was noticing was perhaps the crux, precisely. The key
nice pun.
Yeah. Is known as the hypostatic union. Because the logos incarnate affords a different quality of relationality than the logos in general. So if I'm Lao Tzu, endeavoring deeply to come into relationship with the way, there's so far I can go. If I'm a Neoplatonist contemplating the one, there's so far I can go. But John, now you, the Apostle John, actually meets Jesus. And that's a completely different kind of thing. It's very different. It's as similar as saying my ability to know my wife by virtue of reading her biography and by virtue of actually loving her directly. And so the ability to actually enter into a human scale relationship with the Logos incarnate.
All right, I got to stop it here just because Jordan's going through a lot of deep stuff very quickly, which, again, he's good at, right? People say he's a little high, right? Got to bring him down. So I'm gonna try to do my best to do that. It's weird, right? Because he's right at the crux of Vervaeke's 4 Ps of knowing, which I very much disagree with Vervaeke's model there in some sense. But I like the idea that you just, instead of being more accurate and precise, you call it participatory knowing. So that's the idea. Yeah, knowing your wife by a biography, it would be biography's propositions, guys. That's the agenosis, right? Those are the propositions. Don't try to know somebody by propositions. Well, they went to this school and they took this course and then they did this thing and they were part of this club. These are all useful bits of information, but you don't know the person based on that. You don't know anything about them, right? You know facts about their life, but not facts about them. Very confusing, I know, but also we make this mistake all the time. And then what he's talking about there is knowing his wife by, being in relation with her. Okay, what is a relation? Relations are participations. That's what we're talking about. Participations. Participation is how you relate. The act of relating is the act of participating. When you participate, there is a relation happening at that time, and it has a certain quality. In the same way that reading a biography of your wife has a different quality from actually living with your wife. I like that example. You could have used a lighter example. And so I like too that, he wraps in this idea that in the East, they have the same set of concepts. Yeah, they do. They do. Well, they talk about them differently. Kind of, but not really. Yeah. Just grab Ecclesiastes, grab the Tao Te Ching, preferably multiple translations. You're going to find the same sentences in some cases. I'm just saying, it's kind of important to know. So this idea that there's something fundamentally different about East and West is false. Now, whether or not, again, they lead to the same, we'll say, long-term results in terms of how people are treated, right? Say by their governments, for example, that's just one example. It's absurd that they're equal in implementation. And that, again, goes back to the previous video on this. It's not equal.
Is a qualitatively different kind of thing. And I think there's a lot going on there. And it's the inverse, and a very powerfully bound inverse of then the crucifixion. And these things are yoked together powerfully. I was also, Jonathan, mindful of the talk you gave at the Symbolic World Conference on the Son of Man. Mm-hmm. I kept seeing whatever images were coming to me when you were talking then. I was seeing those images coming up when John was speaking earlier. So, ultimately what we're really talking about is Christ. And ultimately we're really talking about, obviously, in some sense, the thing that differentiates Christianity as a way of doing this sort of thing is Christ. And Christ is the incarnation, the actual, not just the Logos as an abstraction that we can contemplate, which the Greeks do at the highest level, and Lao Tzu does at the highest level, the way, the Logos, but the fact that there's something about the particularity of the eruption of the eternal into the chronological in a particular moment in space and time, and what that does in terms of affording our ability as, in fact, quite distinctly finite beings, right, with a very limited capacity to enter into relationship with the ultimate, in terms of affording that, what would be called the hypostatic union, right? This paradoxical aporia that happens at that level of how the finite and the infinite can actually grow in that relationality.
Wow, that was a lot. Man, Jordan is just, he's on fire, but also lots of big words. Lots of concise speech. There's an over-explaining and an under-explaining. I think that, boy, there's so many concepts in there. So if I want to summarize what I think Jordan is doing, is he's using the idea of participatory knowledge. I wish he'd just use John's term here, it would make it easier, to point out that one of the fundamental differences, and it is a fundamental difference, between not Christianity and Christianity, or in this case, I would say Anglo-Cathodoxy, because I think that's a much more precise term, and Christianity makes very little, if any, sense, is the fact that you have Christ, who is a man plus something, or the eruption of the infinite inside the chronological. I know why he did that. I just don't know that I agree with the move. It's not wrong. It's just a really weird way to say that. The reason why that eruption happens is because you need an exemplar of the highest that is most relatable to you. And therefore, Christ has all the foibles of man, but perfected in final participation, right? In their ultimate end. And so he's tempted, just like man is, right? But he overcomes it ultimately, right? After a prayer, effectively, right? And so he's exemplifying. You pray, you sit, you sin, you're tempted, you pray, you get an answer, as Jordan Peterson would say, right? And that leads you this way. I think actually that's a very helpful way to think about it. It gives you a participation in the world to exemplify or mimic. This goes back to Gerard and mimicry, which I talked about last time. Again, I have talks with Justin. You can check them out. Gerard's not wrong about mimicry. He's missing a bunch of stuff for sure, I would say, but he's not wrong about it. And then we have that in Christ. That seems to be what Jordan's basically saying. I mean, yeah, I don't like the way he frames that, but let's continue.
I want to properly pause here in case either one of you want to say some more, because that was a lot, and it was good, and it was rich. The eschatological, the map is incomplete. That is, of course, also not unique to Christianity. Buddhism has Maitreya, the coming Buddha, and there is no map. So the eschatological sense is, again, found elsewhere. That's just one example. I can give others.
Okay, hold on. You didn't see the trick, did you? You didn't see the trick, did you? Earlier, the complaint was about the map. And now he admits, oh, no, all the maps have the same quality. Well, if the Buddhist map and the Christian map, as they're calling it, have the same quality, this open-endedness, then why, I don't understand. Again, that answered the problem. You said the problem is the map, and now you're admitting the problem is not the map. Make up your mind, John. Seriously, dude. What are you doing? I don't understand. The map doesn't have the quality you assign to it. Well, your problem is invalid. Give it up. No giving it up here. But I wanted to note that because I bet you missed it. It's hard to catch when people do these things. I don't know why they do them. They're probably not doing them on purpose or anything or consciously, but also, what's going on?
And so Although I think I hear an argument building. Yeah, all these things are found elsewhere, but you can only find all of them in sort of your one-stop Enlightenment shop or something that's Christianity. But maybe
I can already hear an argument here. Why, John? No one's talking. What are you hearing? And where's it coming from? Are you making it up yourself? Seems to be a lot of that going on for sure. That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. Look, I'm not saying you can't anticipate other people's arguments. And John does a lot of this calling out, like, well, I want to have some silence first to let you guys talk. Like, what? And then he doesn't. He more excuses the silence he already gave. It could be creepy. I can see why people would think it was creepy.
maybe that's the argument that's building here. We'll see if that's what we're working towards. Now, the idea that the Logos is incarnate in a specific historical person, well, Buddha nature was present in Siddhartha Gautama, and people met him historically, and that's how Buddhism was founded. And so that's not the Christian doctrine of incarnation, but that's not playing fair. You can't say the Buddhists don't have they have that the Dharma was embodied in a way, right, that ignited a religion, right? Mm-hmm. And so again, that would.
Okay, look, the Dharma is not the Logos. It's not even close, and it's not even trying to be. So no, argument is invalid. Automatically incorrect argument. Secondly, there's no corollary between Jesus and other historical figures. Don't know why that's not clear. You can't reduce Jesus down to reincarnation, which is exactly what John did, although he kind of denied it. But no, that's what you did. It's not a reincarnation. That's the wrong way to think about it. There is a reincarnation in Buddhism, and that is wrapped up in, again, the implementation of the concept. So you can say, if I get abstract enough, if I make high-level abstractions high enough and turn them into propositions, then I can just make these two things the same. Sure, they both have a uniting higher principle. I didn't say anything, though. Like, okay, lots of things have a uniting higher principle. Like, why would that be a thing that anybody would ever have to say? And the fact that you have to say it means you're defending something that maybe isn't defensible. That's one way to look at it. And so they're not the same. The problems that John seems to have with Christianity, he doesn't have with the East, but he's making an equivalency argument. Well, what if they're equivalent, then Buddhism has the same problems as Christianity. So clearly, I cannot choose the glass in front of me. Like, I don't. Both glasses are poison, John. You can't pick one. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is a bizarre way of arguing. So again, if you get a weird feeling, maybe this is what your unconscious is picking up on, the fact that you just reduced these two things to the same thing, made it so abstract that of course they're the same, because lots of things would be the same in that circumstance, right? We're only talking about two of them. It's a good trick, right? Like, you just put two things in the frame, and then you make a comment that would fit anything you could put in the frame, but there's only two things you've put in the frame. And so there's a little bit of this cognitive weirdness that happens as the result of that move. That's definitely what's happening here. I don't think John's doing it on purpose, but also I cannot choose the glass in front of me.
Would be the case. Jonathan, I agree with you about the rejection of Gnosticism and many versions of Neoplatonism, but as Filler himself argues, if you properly understand Neoplatonism, it doesn't have the one, and the relationality are always held together in the notion of ultimate reality. It's not the one and relationality, and because it's not a numerical one and it's not a substantial one. It's the oneness of intelligibility in that sense. So
Okay, quick hint. If somebody's trying to talk about, we'll say, well, in this case, two concepts. I don't know why we're always sticking with two here. I know we're not dualists, but apparently we can only talk in twos. A little weird. The oneness and the relationality are not separate from one another, or they are. I like whatever. Like I don't. You just reframing and redefining over and over again. And then you have to drag in intelligibility. Wait a minute. Why do you have to drag in intelligibility? So it's this whole trick of excluding a bunch of things, talking about only two things, and then having to drag more things in so that you can insist at the conclusion of only talking about two things, which is a dualism, by the way. And will always end, all dualisms end the same way, with opposition. That's how they end. It can't end any other way, in fact, at all, ever. Sorry. Also, don't do that. Not hard. You have to drag something in to say, see, these two things have the quality that I want, even though that quality can't be expressed within the two things themselves. Maybe then it's not only two things. Right? In fact, that has to be true. So, this is really hard to catch, but people do this all the time. It drives me nuts because obviously I'm very sensitive to it. Neoplatonism fights Gnosticism because blah blah, big word, blah blah, Harvard, blah. No, did not make the case. You just stated it axiomatically and moved right on and insisted, those same tools are there in Neoplatonism as well. Okay, Neoplatonists, in whatever form they exist in, even though again I insist it's a bad label, are a bunch of Gnostic heretic pagans who are heretical against Plato and the forms mostly. Like Plotinus outright denies aspects of the forms that Plato insists on. Just saying, maybe not what you thought it was, right? This is why they couldn't get together, and this is why they didn't form a religion, and this is why they got wiped out by Christianity, because it doesn't work. Not hard.
Now, you may say, but what I have. I want to do this very carefully. You might be saying that, but in some sense, you both feel. That's the wrong word. Sorry. You both sense that you have had this personal relationship with Jesus. And I'm not saying that in a dismissive fashion. You understand that, please, okay? Is that what this is coming down to, ultimately? Because
it really depends what you mean by that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Because I've heard versions of that I wouldn't identify with. Let's just say.
All right, I'm gonna stop it here. I'm never gonna get through this section either. So, John pivots from the general religious argument to the specific experience of his interlocutors. That is confusing the specific for the general. So he made a general argument, abstracted all the conflicts away between Buddhism and Christianity, although, again, all of the same critiques he made of Christianity would then apply to Buddhism, at least according to what he said, at least as far as I can interpret it. Okay, so nothing changed there. He just said these both suck and they both have this problem. Okay, maybe, but I don't, like, we're not making any progress at that point. We're just throwing more things down the well of badness. I don't know why that's an advancement. And then so he switches the argument into the personal. And then, of course, this causes a problem because my personal experience cannot be extracted out to you. That's not to say that if I have a personal experience, say, going leaf peeping, and you have a personal experience going leaf peeping, that we can't both find generalities or abstractions that we have in common, right? That we experience personally in common, because of course we can, right? But the problem that I have is that doesn't solve a problem. That's just a statement that at some level our experiences are similar. Sure, those are levels of abstraction. There's many levels of abstraction where our experiences may be similar. And as we get further and further away from the abstraction, right, or more concrete or more particular, if you're following the knowledge engine model, which you absolutely should do, then, the similarities vanish, right? They vanish because my experience of leaf peeping and your experience of leaf peeping might have happened 2 years apart, or in different parts of the country, or in different parts of the world, or on different days. Maybe it was sunny when I did my leaf peeping and it was cloudy when you did yours. Right? And so, sure, we both had a wonderful time and the leaves were beautiful, but the beauty that I saw was not the beauty that you saw because I have more light. That actually makes a difference. It also makes a difference to how many colors you can see and what they look like. And there's all sorts of photography things I could go into here, but I don't need to. So I'm not gonna. This isn't a photography class. This is another common trick. Oh, well, my argument failed at the layer of abstraction, a generality, so I'm going to go to the specific and make a different argument because it is a different argument, right? Because I think the key here, and I think Jonathan and Jordan are missing this, is that you can have a personal experience with Jesus. You cannot have a personal experience with the Buddha. That's a kind of a difference. That's maybe, if I had the wherewithal, what I would have brought up. If I had the wherewithal, I'm not saying I would have been able to bring it up in the moment. These are very tricky things. People get very wrapped up when they're talking. Me especially. Don't tell anybody. But it's easy to see why they missed it. But they missed it. Like, that was a missed, in my mind, that was a missed opportunity. And again, I'm not saying I could do any better. I'm not at all sure that's true.
Well, let me help you there, because here's ways in which it doesn't work for me, because people will say, I feel the presence of Jesus and he's telling me to do X, and then this person over here says, I feel the presence of Jesus and he's telling me to do not X, and it's like, oh really? Oh, this makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, that kind of stuff isn't going to track as an argument because it just doesn't line up with the facts. Okay, so
okay. I think John did this earlier. That's a bad example. Just flat out, I'm going to tell you it's a bad example. So let's suppose I have a, quote, encounter with Jesus or God or whatever, an angel, doesn't even matter, right? And it says, you need to go out and preach to the people, right? And then somebody else has an encounter with that same entity, however you want to frame it, and it says you need to go out and you need to do works for your neighbor. Those aren't in conflict. Now, I get it. Maybe John's a little sloppy or whatever. Also, maybe the problem isn't the encounter, but your interpretation of the message. And no one ever addresses this, ever, that I've seen. I'm sure somebody does, but I've never seen anybody address this. It could be your interpretation of the message that's wrong, and not the message, and not the encounter. That's a possible configuration, because interpretation is a thing. I am interpreting this talk for you now. You may have heard this talk and not heard the things that I'm telling you. Those are interpretations, my friend. Now, I'm going to interpret this talk differently because I've listened a lot to Jonathan Pageau. I know Vervaeke's work really well, and I've listened quite a bit to Jordan Hall. I've had conversations about all three of them with multiple people in the past, and in relation to their work, often when they're talking to each other, even, right? So lots of contrast. And so the things I'm going to notice, because I'm already primed for what their arguments generally tend to be and how they generally tend to go, are different from what you're going to be primed for, just because of my experience. And so it's going to lead to a different interpretation of what's going on, because I have a different context, hopefully more of it. And that's why I'm doing this. By the way, it's a lot of work. So you want to drop me a buy me a coffee or something? That'd be great. Because man, I'm just, this is a lot of work. Listening to these guys is a lot of work. So if what they're saying is contradictory, the answer isn't, then they must not have encountered the same experience. That's incorrect, actually. There's no logical reason to believe that. That's rather irrational belief. There are lots of other possibilities, interpretation being only one, or something that seems to conflict, at least to you and I, but actually doesn't. But we wouldn't know that because we're dumb. And we're dumb. So that's another possibility, right? And then there's the whole, you're filtering this through humans. So I don't know if you guys know this. Humans are imperfect and we screw up all the time. And just because we screw up doesn't mean that our encounters aren't real or our experience of reality is off. It could be we just made a mistake. That's all. Like, why do we have to make this hard? Why do we have to make this a fundamental contradiction of the universe or fundamental contradiction of the religion when there's other possibilities that are far more likely that we know about? Like, why don't we go with those first?
So,
Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I don't know this about you, Jonathan, but I imagine, for example, when you have an actual experience of profound grief, utterly shattering, right? Well beyond maps, right? Well beyond any notion, deeper than your faith, a grief deeper than your faith, and you notice that there's something there. Right? You're not alone in that grief. There's nothing else that you can imagine, right? You're beyond mind. Right? You're beyond meditation. And as you enter into that, you notice that something has qualities. And a way of naming those qualities is love. Right? So that would be an example of what that means. Like when you really, really, really go to the experience of a profound relationship with how loss works. And the shattering of your ability to enter into identity at all. Right? You notice that non-duality is not the actual thing that's at the bottom. That there's something more fundamental than that. And the only way we can talk about it would be the thing that is called love.
Wow, there was a lot there. I'm not sure I could follow everything Jordan was saying there. I kind of think I get the gist of where he was going, which is to say, the thing that holds you together in your darkest hour when you lose your faith is still love. And therefore that's, quote, beyond non-duality. I don't know why you'd equate non-duality and love. There's a lot of this reduction and stuff going on where people are trying to simplify things. I think this is a result of the age of gnosis, right? Where propositions as knowledge are the highest value. And then people are trying to give that knowledge to others and they're trying to spoon feed them. So I think that's what's going on here, roughly speaking. I mean, obviously it's a little more, there's a lot more than that going on, but I think that's going on. And the way I would sort of resolve this is to say the fact that there's an encounter with something that unifies us in our multiplicity, and we refer to that as love, I know, equivocal, sloppy word. John Vervaeke's excellent point on that, by the way. Means that not only do maps fail, but the idea of, I want to call it mere non-duality. Because again, the problem with this non-duality is non-duality could mean 0, 1, 3, infinity, anything in between. That's not helpful at all. It's not symmetrical. You can't say the solution to duality is non-dual. That's not true. It's not symmetrical. There's no solution for it. At least there's no single solution. Right. Why do people like duality? Because it gives you a certain single answer. It doesn't give you the certain same single answer. That's the problem with it. But it gives you a high certainty answer. Just an A or B answer. It kind of sucks. And then people, try the Hegel trick, which is just a trick and also wrong, where they say, oh, the A and the B, and from this emerges the C. It's all duality. No, you didn't. You just proved that duality is wrong because there's a third thing. It doesn't matter how the third thing comes about. You didn't transcend duality by inventing the third thing. You might have noticed it, but that just means before that you were stupid. Eyes to see. So in order to not reduce this to, quote, non-dual, of course, non-duality. Duh. Like, I don't even know why anybody's mentioning duality anymore. We know duality can't be correct. We already know this. Let's move past that. Please, let's move on. Right. Let's move to the Trinity. It comes after 2, 3. Let's try that. Okay. So the reason why that's important is because, there's threeness, there's the connections, which are the relationships, and then there's qualities. Bang. And it's the qualities that are held within the relationships that save you when you lose all faith in, we'll say, the goodness of existence itself. That is what I would say. Because I think it's a little more clear. Listen, if that's not clear, stop the video, comment right now and let me know. Say, Mark, that wasn't clear at all. That would be fine. That would be helpful, actually. Because again, I don't know how clear I am, obviously, sometimes to all of my audience. Certainly can't know that for all of the audience. So it's nice to know if people understand that, or particularly if they don't, because that's the more important part.
The same thing happens, by the way, from my point of view, if you go all the way to the highest level. But that's a little bit trickier in my experience.
So can you say that last thing? Because so first of all, thank you for that. That's a powerful and rich thing to say. So I'm not, you're aware that it's deeper than non-duality. You're invoking spatial metaphors, which of course are transcended by non-duality. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to get at what that. So I might have a sense of what you're talking about. People talk about a sensed presence, which is neither objective nor subjective, neither emanating nor emergent, but deeper, and that you don't know it by other than participating it and being it. But I don't mean in a logical identity sense. Like when
boy, there's a lot there. So look, I don't know what transcends non-duality means, because that doesn't make any sense at all ever, and it can't be made sense of ever, just to let you know. So if you couldn't make sense of that, that's because no one can. It's okay. This idea of an experience is neither an emanation nor an emergence, okay. All you're saying is there's more to the universe than you thought. That's all you're saying. Lots of fancy words to say, wow, there's a lot of different parts here. Yep, there are. That is correct. There's a lot of different parts here. The idea that you would know from your personal middle out position in the world. You're stuck in middle out. See my video, Middle Out Thinking? I'll link it here. That you would know the difference between things emanating upon you and emerging from underneath you is suspect to me. There may be times when such a thing is obvious, I guess. But actually, all things seem to come from within us. Now, are they emergent little demons, or are they emanations from a higher good place? Good question. I don't know. I don't know why in this context that matters. I mean, ultimately it matters. Yeah, you need to know. Is it a demon whispering to me or not? Look, everybody's already aware of this. There's that whole trope, which, has a cartoon and was used in early cartoons, for example, of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. Everybody knows this, right? There's something sort of that you're in the middle of, that could be top to bottom, emergence to emanation, and you can't tell. Just as with the devils, do you listen to the one on your right shoulder or your left shoulder? Devils and angels, I should say. This isn't interesting or new or like, who cares? At this level, who cares? I had an experience. Okay, we're not talking about the quality of the experience, other than to say it doesn't have the quality of emanation or emergence. Are those qualities even? See, and this is where it gets fuzzy. Like, how do you talk about emanation versus emergence versus whatever this is, which is neither? But it's not neither. It's being reported as neither. Those aren't the same thing. One reason why you might report it as neither is because you can't tell the difference. Oh, wait. This is why self-report is unreliable. Yes, it is. So that's a problem with the argumentation as such. And you need to be aware of that problem.
When you're deeply in love with somebody in an agapic way, is that what you mean? And again, I'm not trying to do a judo move on you. I'm trying to understand.
No, I get it. I mean, think of what we're talking about here. Talking about doing neurosurgery, which is perfect, right? This is where we are, by the way. I mean, we meaning the species, right? Where the species is actually here. We got to get this shit figured out. There's no more knocking around, beating around the bush. We have to take the level of care and precision and actual embodied love and clarity that's necessary. So let's see. Oh man, yeah. What I notice is that. Oh, okay, nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something, and it's actually going to be trite.
Okay.
But it's the best thing I can get out of my mouth right now, and an endeavor to collaboratively get there.
I'll take it charitably, Jordan. I promise. I'll take it charitably.
And by the way, I'm going to reinforce this. This has to be 3. So
yeah.
John, you're participating.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here real quick. I just want to point one thing out to you. I'm not going to make an accusation, okay? I'm just going to make a point, though. There are certain tells about behavior, and if you are pre-apologizing for actions you have not yet taken, that could be a sign of a number of different things, but it is a sign of one of these things, and maybe more than I can list, but I'm going to do my best here. When you pre-apologize for things, either I think you're not being seen and heard as embodying the things that you feel you're actually embodying, right? Or you're priming yourself to embody those things because you don't trust yourself. Maybe unconsciously. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I don't have access to that. I don't care. Or it could be that you are trying to excuse your behavior, right? Or it could be that you're trying to deflect a bad image irrespective of your good or bad behavior. Those are different things. Again, I'm not trying to give you necessarily an exhaustive list, although I think that's a pretty good one. That's a tell for that, because like if you do it once, whatever, who cares? Like people make mistakes. Like once is not an interesting data point, right? Once is a random data point. That's anecdotal evidence, although that's not how people use anecdotal evidence. Sometimes it is. A single sample size is just not very interesting. But when you do it 4 times or 5 times in a conversation in the span of 35 minutes or 36 minutes or so, I got questions. You seem to be telling me something about yourself and about your own internal state, because these gentlemen are not accusing anyone of anything. There's been no accusation. No one came into the conversation thinking, oh, bad actor. Not with John Vervaeke anyway. So just keep that in mind, because that's a pattern you're going to see all over the internet in particular. So there are little tells that people do all the time. And I just pick up on most of them, I think. Very important.
So if we go towards the direction of joy, so joy and grief being gates to this relationship, what we notice when we get to profound levels of joy is a feeling of the presence of the infinite, like a proximity towards something which is of the nature of the transcendent, yet in the realm of the immanent, right? Something that we are able to experience, but is increasingly accelerating beyond anything that could actually be present or contained within experience within the finite. Right? So we accelerate in that direction. And as we move in that direction, what we begin to notice is that we do not actually dissolve into that, but rather are embraced by it. Right? And that's the key, or the key difference, is that the relationship between the infinite and the finite is not a mistake. And there's nothing about the way that creation is that is not good. And that the ability for us to be in a relationship that is governed by that as a fundamental is, how do I say? I can't. It's not my words. Somebody else has to say it.
Okay. Wow. I don't think I've ever seen Jordan top out like that twice. That's fascinating. I feel for Jordan. This idea that you're not absorbed, but you're embraced. Now, the interesting thing about that, for me, and again, this is my first time hearing this, is that's very much the difference between Western and Eastern philosophies, or spiritual traditions, spiritual traditions. Scratch philosophies, go with spiritual traditions. Is that the Western is very much about embracing and participating in a relationship that has clear, understandable boundaries. And the East is very much about blurring the lines, because they think cyclically. See The Geography of Thought by Nesbitt. Great book. I learned a lot from it. I'm still angry about it, but whatever. We all have our limitations, and apparently everybody in the West is very limited in their thought and can't think cyclically. And so when we read the Eastern stuff, this is that Western Buddhist idea that I keep harping on about, we tend to see it as an absorption. And that's very comforting, because now we can, be one, right? And then they link it to theosis. And yes, but also no. Not quite. In the Western thought, because of the Western mind and the way it thinks about things, embrace is a better way to put it. So I like that Jordan did that. I thought that was very clever. And I think it's right. I don't think what he was saying was trite. Sometimes things sound trite because you're the idiot. You just didn't get the depth. So keep that in mind. A lot of trite things are not
Well, I think that the thing that comes to me when you're saying what you're saying is that that Christianity, I believe Christianity really does, in its highest instantiations, really does have a sense that the source of reality is non-dual, right? That the way that we describe God as a Trinity is a way to describe the infinite, right? Not a way, but it's a manifestation of the infinite in a type of aporia that joins unity and multiplicity together. Saint Maximus says things like, God is being and non-being.
Yeah, exactly.
That type
Yeah.
of language. Now, I think what Jordan is bringing up, which I think is really important in the vision of Christianity, is that Christianity deeply understands that non-dual is not a vortex that swallows the world into it, right? That's not something that wants to call you out of being, that wants to call you out of reality into some like infinite bliss or whatever. That in fact what it does is that it affords all of reality in it, but in a specific way, right? There's a specific manner in which it makes the world exist, and that way is surprising at the outset, because that in that way is something like self-sacrificial love.
Yeah.
And that the self-sacrificial love is the mode of existence. And so Christ manifests that in the extreme. He manifests that in the, in a way that is kind of almost unbearable to watch, but it becomes an image of how it is that we can participate in non-duality without escaping the world. We're not escaping our desires. We're not escaping our bodies. We're not doing any of that stuff. We're not denying any of the goodness of the world. And what that looks like is that image. I think it's that image that I mentioned in Revelation, which is the king and the sacrifice together, right? The highest and the lowest joined together, and one of them affording the other, right? The reason why Christ is king is because he was on the cross, and and vice versa. That image of Jesus on the cross with the sign above that says, "The King." This is the King, folks. And I think that all of Christianity is about that, and that's why everything that Christians argue in the first centuries about the nature of Christ, about preserving his divinity, preserving his humanity, all of these questions are about the way in which the transcendent is actually that which makes the immanent exist, and that's the balance that Christianity brings about. Now, I don't know if there are other. I'm not an expert on all world religions. I don't know if there are other forms that have that, that anchor, right? That hold. What I see in many other religions is a tendency to emphasize the escape, right? Like we have to, and Christians, by the way, fall in that all the time. Like Christians actually will tend to say things, die and go to heaven, like that kind of language. It's actually profoundly not Christian. It's such a habit that humans have to want that. But when you look at even the Bible, or if you look at the way that the fathers talk about Christianity, it's not at all that type of. It isn't that escape, right? It's like the kingdom of heaven is not the same as heaven. It's that joining together, right?
Okay, yeah, I love what Jonathan said there. That's pretty good. I am going to try to translate it though, because that is like the purpose of this video to some extent, is to try to translate these guys into yet another language or set of terminology to provide you contrast. So maybe you can see what they're saying a little bit better. Even if it wasn't confusing, right? Maybe it'll be sharper. And so to my mind, what he's saying is, rather than offering you a way out or a different world, it's offering you a way to integrate who and what you are with the perfection of the world, or the goodness of the world. That is the way I would frame it. That seems to me to be what he's saying. And other religions are much more prone to explicitly saying either you're trapped, reincarnation, until you perfect yourself, in which case you escape, right? Or you must escape, right? That's the Gnostic idea. And therefore, right? And there's other formulations, but those are the two big ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So, look, I mean, that I think is important. I think it's important to realize that Christianity does afford you something special and different in that escape. And that special and different is important and understandable and discernible and intelligible. Look, this is a long video already. It's not as long as the last one, but I'm going to end it here again with Jonathan Pageau, because I love him. He's just fantastic. And I think it's a good place to end it. And if you want another one of these, man, this is taking forever. This is really hard to do. Then let me know in the comments. And if I get enough motivation, I'll do it. In the meantime, I'm going to do a different commentary video. So we'll be doing two at the same time. I don't know why I want to put myself through this, but apparently I do. So with that, I just want to thank you for sticking with this. And look, let me know if this is helpful. Let me know, if I'm not hitting the mark, or if I'm, less clear than three of these guys or whatever, because I do appreciate the feedback. And I know the first part of this is doing quite well. So I hope the rest of these will do as well. And thank you very much.